all you can ask them to do is to step on eggshells around you, which is actually not an appropriate ask. Like, who are you? Why do you get to ask other people to be careful around you all the time? Why do you get to ask people to walk on eggshells around you? Maybe I'm just a little too egalitarian in all of this, but I'm like, I don't think anybody should be elevated.
Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We are rolling along in a short series about self-regulation. Mm-hmm. We're using personality types as not only a type system, but a topographical system to find the parts of us that need more regulation. In the last episode, we talked about physical, somatic regulation. In this episode, we want to open up feeling regulation, like in our emotions. This is an obvious one, Antonia, that everybody I think has an experience with, either themselves or somebody else.
Yeah.
Since the moment of birth, we're crying. We need regulated when mom leaves the room as we're a small newborn, and we freak out and cry, and then mom has to come in and help us regulate our emotions.
Yeah.
And I think we deal with that for the rest of our lives.
Actually, birth is kind of a nice illustration of how we first are somatically unregulated when we're born.
Yeah.
And then we were emotionally unregulated. We're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And I think I want to go to the emotions next, because generally when we're self-regulating, this is the right layering of things to address. We first check in with our bodies and make sure that doesn't need some regulation as a baseline. And then once our bodies or somas are self-regulated, then we can move up to the emotions and make sure our emotions are regulated. And then we can move on to the cognitive and the existential.
We did a whole episode about this, by the way, to frame the entire series. Like a long episode, so we have a lot of information in there, a lot of ways to think about this. But could you catch us up in the cliff notes?
You got it.
30 to 60 seconds, maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it'll take.
If it's me, it'll probably take longer, but I'll do my best. So what we mean by self-regulation is we're talking about the ability to consciously manage one's inner state. And we're discussing it in multiple channels. So like we mentioned the last time, we talked about the physiological or the somatic, which in type terms or personality type terms, we're aligning with, say, our relationship to our sensing functions. So our sensing functions are oftentimes when something is off in one of those channels, that's usually when we feel dysregulated. And if we don't have a sensing function very high up in our cognitive stack, or high up in the car model, one of the first two players there, the front seat of the car model, then it's easy for us to become dysregulated or neglect the concept completely. And the challenge with not building a practice of self-regulating in any channel is that we then look to the outside world to do our regulation in our behalf. And so we start outsourcing it. And when somebody doesn't do a good job, which of course they cannot, because nobody can regulate us other than ourselves, we get upset, we get mad, and we just make the situation worse. So last episode, we talked about doing that for our bodies, for our somas, right? And using the sensing channels to do that. And in this episode, we're going to talk about emotional regulation, and we're going to align that with the feeling functions. So self-regulation basically means that we're calming ourselves down. We're addressing our state, and we do that through processing, and we also do that through interfacing. There's different ways that we can regulate ourselves. Sometimes we just need to sit with ourselves and go introspective and internal. Sometimes we need to take action and let off some steam, or interact or engage. But regardless, it is our job to keep our finger on the pulse of that. And dysregulated means that we're in a state that has basically, this is all breaking down, right?
Yeah.
Like the ability to manage is breaking down. And now we're in reaction. Usually it happens through a trigger, right? Some internal or external trigger. And now we are overwhelmed. We are sometimes disoriented. Sometimes it feels paralyzing.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get from that state to the regulated one. And so self-regulation is how we take our power back, how we bring that in-house. And so we don't have to, feel so much at the mercy of the world around us.
So when we talk about feeling, if we look at this through a lens of personality types, we can go to the Jungian cognitive functions, basically where the Myers-Briggs system came from, which is these building blocks of cognition. We talk about there's two ways to express feeling. There's an attitude toward it. There's an external attitude or outwardly focused. We call that extroverted feeling. We have a nickname called Harmony for this. Or it's an inwardly focused feeling, an introverted feeling, which we call authenticity. And so when we talk about feeling, there's these two aspects. One's more about the processing of feeling, releasing the emotions maybe we're carrying, processing through those emotions. The other one's about emotional interfacing with the outside world, the harmony between people, understanding social conditions or expectations, hierarchies, all these kinds of things in an interactive way.
Yeah.
So we're talking about those two cognitive functions. If we talk about feeling from a type standpoint, how can we best get into this conversation today? Let's talk about what it means to be, maybe the definitions of what it even means to be emotionally regulated. Because I would say when people think about somebody needing to be regulated, they immediately, like if you haven't trained yourself to think of these four categories of body, emotion, mental, and abstract or intuitive.
Yeah.
I think we always would just think it's always emotional. Like this is a big one. This is a big one. And everybody kind of has a sense of what this looks like when it's not being done well.
Sure. Well, and I think also on top of that, if a person's a type enthusiast, then the way we're talking about these functions might even feel a little foreign. Because, somebody might say, well, the feeling functions aren't just about emotions. They're about making decisions. They're decision making. And we're making decisions based on values.
That's right.
And so that's true. That is fundamentally what introverted feeling and extroverted feeling are attempting to do, is to make decisions based on values of what's best for me and what's best for other people. And the reason why we're placing or sort of coding emotional regulation, self-regulation, and associating it with the feeling functions is that the feeling functions tune into emotions to give it the information it needs in order to determine those values and ethics.
Yeah.
It's reading emotions. It's reading how things are making me feel. And it could feel, it doesn't have to be like acutely emotional. It could be a more subtle feeling, right? Oh, that makes me feel off. That makes me feel weird. But it's still the information about oneself is being determined by sort of an emotional, frequently an emotional hit. How did that make me feel? Oftentimes beyond just that it makes me feel off or weird. What does it mean to feel off or weird? Well, oftentimes it's like, well, it actually makes me feel, sort of an inside out. It makes me feel disgust, or it makes me feel sad, or it makes me feel angry or frustrated, right? It's generally an emotion that gets triggered that allows introverted feeling or authenticity to know how it was reacting or responding to, the catalyst.
That movie's an entire movie about self-regulation.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, that's why it's such a great, both movies are so great.
Yeah, that absolutely is what those movies are about, is self-regulation. Yeah, you're totally right. And so, which is why they're fabulous. Yeah, I would agree with that. So even though the functions themselves are not, they're not emotional in all of their aspects in the production, it's not necessarily emotional. But the content it's reading is emotional. It's reading emotional content. So when somebody has extroverted feeling harmony or introverted feeling authenticity as a preferred function, they tend to be a little bit more attuned to emotional content. And so they're not as afraid of self-regulation in these ways. They're less likely to ignore or neglect the need completely. They're more, bare minimum, because they're looking at how emotions are affecting people, they know what it looks like when somebody's not emotionally self-regulated, right? They can usually tell that this person, extroverted feeling of harmony, it can totally tell when somebody's unregulated or dysregulated, right? Like it reads that content and goes, oh, that person has a need, right? That's one of its clearest channels of communication. So, while we are taking a little bit of, some liberties here by saying emotional regulation, we're charting it to the topography of these two functions, it's really not that big of a stretch because these functions are intrinsically linked to emotional content, right? Like that is what it's reading. So all of that said, what does it mean to be emotionally regulated? What is the definition? And it, just like with the soma, emotional regulation is managing emotional responses so that feelings are recognized, expressed, and processed appropriately without becoming overwhelming or suppressed. So emotional regulation means that we're paying attention to our emotions, that we are processing them. We could even be releasing them, right? Giving them their due, acknowledging and recognizing them without handing ourselves over to the experience and letting it take us for a ride, or completely compartmentalizing or shutting it down.
Yeah. Okay. What does it mean to not be regulated, though?
So dysregulated would mean that we're doing the opposite of that, that we're not acknowledging our feelings, or maybe we are, but overly so, and handing ourselves over to the experience. But maybe examples would be good. So an example of regulation is feeling sadness after a disappointment, allowing ourselves to grieve for a little bit, but then staying connected to daily life and relationships without collapsing. All right, so we experience a disappointment, didn't feel good. We let ourselves experience the emotion around, sadness around disappointment, but then we're back in the game, right? And we can go engage with life without it crushing us. An example of being dysregulated is like a minor disagreement with a friend leading to uncontrollable sobbing or rage, right? Feeling abandonment or betrayal, even if the argument was relatively minor. So having disproportionate, responses to things. And oftentimes that's usually a symbol of a lot of unprocessed emotion.
You mentioned in the kind of the factor of this, not suppressing emotion. And I think I mentioned this on both of the last two episodes, that sometimes we're not even allowing the channel to hit us. Mm-hmm. So we might think we're regulating this well, but in reality, like I used the example of my physical body in the last episode. If I don't eat all day, I used to be able, when I was younger, I could get away with that. It didn't hit me. But now if I don't eat all day, like I'm starting to register, I get hangry and I have a problem with that. And I thought I was always good at regulating my physical body all this time. But it's because I wasn't noticing the channel of hunger. Mm-hmm. Physiologically, my body changed. Now I am. And now I realize just how much I didn't actually do any regulation for myself. It was just the fact I wasn't paying attention to it. So I could lie to myself and say, oh, I don't need that. Mm-hmm. I'm really good at this. I don't need to regulate that. And I could see somebody in an emotional way. They just are very stoic. They don't allow emotions to come into their frame. They try to control their world to a degree where they don't feel a lot of up and down emotion. They've neutralized emotion. No highs, no lows. And they're like, look, I'm so regulated. But they could just be turning them off altogether, or just suppressing them altogether, or keeping them at bay. Yeah. So I think you have to have discretion for yourself. If you're listening or watching right now, are you a person who is just turning that channel off and you're lying to yourself and saying, I'm regulated? And if something emotionally came into your life, you couldn't handle it because you, quote unquote, regulated, you're not really. Or have you actually truly gone through the emotional processing and understand how this works, and you truly are regulating your emotions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think this is the one where there's that, I would say this binary is the most extreme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the categories that we're talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who don't realize how much they're compartmentalizing their emotional experience.
Yes.
And particularly, this idea of, when I said before, usually if somebody does a minor offense and you have an outsized reaction to it, it's oftentimes a symbol of emotional stacking, which is like the first 20 times something happens to you, you just absorb it and you go, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Oh, that's not that big of a deal. And you keep telling yourself it's not that big of a deal until now that like the 20th time somebody does something, suddenly you're just exploding and you're watching yourself have this extreme reaction to something that you told yourself 19 times before was no big deal.
Yes.
And that's, it's called emotional stacking. And it happens when we do not honor we don't honor how much something is affecting us, but we do it if we just don't honor emotions to begin with, usually it's a symbol of not honoring emotions, because we have built, either was given to us or we evolved them over time, but we have capacities to compartmentalize our emotions to get us through difficult challenges, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to survive long term. If every emotion had to be attended or addressed at the moment it was created, we would have a very difficult time getting anything done.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that the emotion went away simply because we're not feeling it as strongly as when it first hit us. We now have a job to do. Like basically all of the emotions that go on our radar need to be processed in some way. We need to be processing almost like a hygiene routine, the emotions that are striking us. Doesn't mean we have to process absolutely every single emotion that we experience, but if we've registered it and we took a little bit of a hit, then we probably need to at least address it, at least acknowledge it or recognize it and go, yeah, I guess that made me feel that way, right? Even just recognizing it all by itself can be enough to release it, right?
Yeah.
We don't always have to do some like big, emotional process and release, discipline or exercise. Sometimes we just have to address it.
Yeah.
But if we don't, that's oftentimes when suddenly we have this like really exaggerated response and we go, oh, where did that come from? Right? Like what happened there? and we don't take those moments as a sign. We take that moment as a sign of dysregulation, but we don't take it as a symbol of just general dysregulation, which we are. We are generally dysregulated if we have those spike moments. Because we weren't doing the maintenance in between. We were not recognizing that these emotions needed to be addressed over time and handled them over time so that when we got to that moment, we didn't have a spike. We didn't have this like explosion because it wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. We'd been addressing it the entire time.
Yeah.
So regulation actually isn't just regulating ourselves in spike point moments and triage moments. Emotional regulation means that we have a discipline of acknowledging, recognizing, processing, and releasing our emotions on a regular basis.
I'm very comfortable bringing my emotions out, especially more now than ever. And I've noticed, and maybe this is personal to me, but I bet you'd agree, and maybe if you're watching or listening, you'd agree as well. If someone expresses emotions or they appear deregulated or dysregulated, and first of all, a lot of people, just if it's intense, they think you're dysregulated. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about how we know if we're regulated versus dysregulated. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the metrics there.
Yeah.
Because just me being intense, people are like, whoa, what's going on? And they like want to calm me down and help me regulate. And I'm like, no, I'm in control of this. I'm just bringing it intensely. So that's one channel. But the other channel is, let's say it is a little bit of deregulation or dysregulation, or maybe me or somebody else. I've just noticed that people are more judgy about this than the others. Like if you're physically out of whack, like your nervous system's off, you're hangry, or you're shaking from too much caffeine, people are like, oh, they give you a pass. They don't judge you for that. If you are struggling with like thoughts, or like you're thinking clearly and you're dysregulated in your thoughts, we'll talk about that in the next episode, people give you a pass more. If you are esoterically, or your imagination's a little like, calm down, it's fine. You don't have to, like, they give you a pass. You're emotionally unregulated, or they perceive you to be unregulated emotionally. The judgment is so severe, so harsh, and so extreme from the world. That's been my personal experience. And even if I'm not dysregulated, but they think I am, just because I'm intense or I'm very dramatic in that moment. And that upsets me.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. I'm just lamenting. We can go on now. I just want to say that.
I like it. I don't like it.
I just don't like it. I hate the fact that the thing that I feel is the most important part of me, this emotional part, gets the most judgment from the world of all of them.
Yeah.
And other feelers too. It's not just like thinker types that judge it. It's like everybody seems to judge it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's like so judged harshly. It's like you're bad and wrong, and you lose credibility, you lose status, people judge it harsher. And I'm like, but this is, and not all cultures. Like if you go to Latin American cultures, it's like, I was talking to my friend Ryan recently. He's from Brazil, and he's like, in Brazil, men are supposed to emote dramatically and bombastically, and they're rewarded for it there. Mm-hmm. But here in America, it's like punished terribly. So I'm just lamenting. Thank you for letting me have that little moment of lamentations.
Yeah, lamentations over the culture that doesn't allow this intense emotional drama. So I have a counterpoint to that.
Oh boy.
Well, it's not that complicated. It's just
even you can understand it, Joel.
That's not what I'm saying. What I meant is that it's not going to be a massive segue that like leads off into like a 20-minute conversation.
Fair enough.
That's all I meant.
Joel, even you could understand this.
Stop. Don't make me cognitively regulate you. Only you can do that for yourself. No, it's because the bias is in the experience, meaning that you do not appear physically unhealthy. So you don't have the judgment from the world of being of appearing unhealthy physically. And if a person appears unhealthy physically in any way, or if a person has like if they appear dysregulated in their soma, even if it's a precondition, they experience a lot of judgment from it. In fact, I would say that's probably some of the harshest judgment people get is based on their bodies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I can see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think if and maybe that's more of a maintenance-y judgment. Like it's more a state of being unhealthy. I always think of, for some reason, I don't. And we even talked about it in the last episode. But when I imagine deregulation physically, I don't struggle maybe with chronic deregulation. So maybe that's why it's usually a spike point. And and those spike points I feel are less judged.
Yeah, spike points of dysregulation physically. Like if you're like, if you're nervous and you're pitting out, people go, I get that. I get being nervous.
Yeah, they can empathize.
Right. But if your regulation maintenance is not good for your soma, everybody judges that.
Like if my teeth were falling out and I had bad breath every day and I didn't shower. And I've got I smell bad every single day, I'm going to have a problem. People are going to judge that.
Or even if you've got, like I said, like a precondition, there's a lot of people who their bodies are, I think of somebody who, has something like multiple sclerosis or something like they just cannot do anything about it.
They're judged for that? I mean, that's that. I don't think people judge for that, do they?
Not mature adults.
Okay.
Right. But there's like an immature part of us.
What about like diabetes or
I would say if anything's what a person could call weird. Not if you're diabetic, especially type 1 diabetes, the only way you would know that maybe is because a person has an implant in their arm, right? That's not going to be noticeable in most ways. But my sister had epilepsy, really, really severe epilepsy. And I know you would think that a person would not be made fun of for having a grand mal seizure, but she certainly was, right?
Well, I'm sure kids do.
Well, even sometimes really terrible adults.
But people in the office are okay. I don't feel that way towards people, so it's hard for me to put myself in that place. But I understand.
No, people are very weirdly judgmental.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad you said that because now my limitation has been softened.
Yeah. This is the one that you experience though, and so it feels like it's the most.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so hopefully it wasn't a 20-minute segue, but
let's talk about how we measure this. How can we know qualitatively, am I regulated or dysregulated in my emotions? Someone might ask, how can one know this?
Okay, so signs that you are doing a good job self-regulating emotionally is that you can feel emotions without being overwhelmed by them, that you're able to soothe yourself after emotional upsets, that expressing emotions, you can express emotions appropriately for the situation. Like I mentioned, you don't have these outsized responses because you've been bottling up emotions for a long time, or you have no reaction when you probably should. Right? Yeah. You're a resilient person. You have good recovery time after an upset, like something that happens to you or a setback. That you have awareness of your feelings without needing to act impulsively on them. All right. So you can experience and feel an emotion without it necessarily dictating your, the reaction to the outside world or whatever was the catalyst for that. And then having emotional range, right? Meaning that you're not always in one extreme emotion. You have the capacity to feel all your feelings, as generally signs of emotional regulation.
Gotcha. So if somebody's just regulated in one channel, that's not as valid as if you're regulated all the channels.
Well, it means that I don't know about that. Yes.
Somebody that's worked on their anger. I don't get triggered and I'm angry, but they're bawling their eyes out and freaking, they're collapsing all the time and crying and sad all the time. Yes. They're never angry because they worked on that, but now they this channel over here. Yeah. There's more work to do in regulation. Okay.
Right,
so how do we know we're not regulated? What's the metric here?
So if your symbols that you are emotionally dysregulated is that you have emotional outbursts, maybe explosive anger. There's a numbing out or emotional shutdown, which is the other side of that. There's an inability to self-soothe after distressing situations. So you don't know how, you can't self-soothe. And mood swings that are disproportionate emotional reactions for the situation. So you can usually tell emotional dysregulation. It's usually in the extremes of either too much or too little. And so that's a symbol that a person needs to do more work around self-regulating.
Yeah. So we look to the outer world to help us regulate, which is basically outsourcing this. Let's talk a little bit about this aspect of it when we attempt to have someone else regulate our emotions for us.
Yeah. So there's a healthy and an unhealthy version of what's called co-regulation. We talked about this in the first episode of the series, that healthy co-regulation is basically creating a situation or a circumstance where the people involved can do a better job of self-regulating. So an example of this might be if you start to fight with your partner and you each call a timeout, right? And that would be like emotional co-regulation. It's like, we're both getting pretty heated here. Maybe we just need a minute to step aside, step out and then just kind of go self-regulate and then meet back. So that would be like good, healthy co-regulation. There's also unhealthy co-regulation, which is more like enmeshment. It's more like codependence. And this is the thing I mentioned before, which is so dangerous, which is the outside world is responsible for my emotional regulation. And while I don't know if anybody would ever think in those specific exact terms, like I don't think anybody says that phrase to themselves in their mind, we certainly act like it a lot. We totally act like other people are responsible for how we feel and that they should be doing things that allow us to feel better about the situation or circumstance. And in those moments, that is unhealthy. That is a seeking unhealthy co-regulation.
So you say that's not something that people think about, and I don't want to get into the specifics of this, but wouldn't that be like a trigger warning? A request, like you should have put something on this movie I'm about to watch with all the elements that could trigger me. That would be asking the outside world to make sure we can regulate our emotions, because I don't know what I'm going to get into in this movie. You need to tell me all the things I'll be emotionally experiencing before I get there, so I know I can manage it through.
Yeah. Well, I think this goes back to back in that first episode too, we discussed safe spaces.
Yeah.
I think the original intent was good. I think the original intent was healthy co-regulation, but I think it has become at this point, I think it has become a little bit of a crutch, honestly. Personally, I mean, I know as soon as I say that, I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of people being like, no, trigger warnings are super important. But I do think that when we warn everybody about a potential trigger, we don't allow people to assess their own self-regulation. Does that make sense? It's like, it's triggers that tell us whether or not we are self-regulating. Okay. How would we know otherwise?
But if there's this, let's say I've had a trauma in my life. Mm-hmm. So I know that anytime somebody talks about this trauma or brings it up, it's going to make me feel a very particular emotion that's very intense and difficult to come down from.
Yeah.
So I'm making sure that, like, I'm not going to go to like a concert with a singer who sings about that topic because I know for a fact that's going to make me feel bad. So I just choose not to do that. But I turn on a popular television program or a movie, I don't necessarily know they're going to talk about that topic in there. In fact, I thought it was about something else. And here there's this scene or this moment where it's this thing that I was not able to deal with, and I would have not engaged with it had you let me know this was in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That seems like a reasonable, it's on the surface seems like a reasonable ask. And to say, well, that removes the surprise of it. I think that's the whole, people don't want to be surprised by it. I think that you're speaking to the exact thing that they don't want to have happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's understandable that people would want the warning, but it's not self-regulation. Like, self-regulation is when the trigger happens.
Being able to cope with that.
That's right. You have the capacity to get to the other side of it. And there's something to be said for not being able to anticipate those moments. Like, to be able to, like, to having it incidentally happen to you, and then having to get to the other side. Now, there's also an argument to be made for the other side too. I mean, sure. I can appreciate that, especially if trauma is very fresh.
Yes.
If trauma is fresh, or if it's something severe. That is very severe, and a person just kind of is right now trying to work on it. Now, I also I have a personal belief, which is not something that I think our world would be better if everybody shared it, but I also recognize I could be wrong. And that is the moment we know we have something that's dysregulated inside of us, then it is our job to immediately get to stepping on regulating it. And that could take literally years, right? Like, I mean, I understand massive traumas can take years of therapy, of inner game work, of processing work. Like, I'm not saying it's an easy thing. There are some traumas that are horrific, and some traumas that, I mean,
they change you.
They change you, right? And you don't
fundamentally.
Exactly. And it's there are some contexts where people have had to experience things that I don't know. I mean, I wonder sometimes if they'll ever get to the other side of them. So there is something to be said for somebody who's in that situation, not wanting to be re-traumatized through content or entertainment, right? And so I understand that it's a kindness to be able to give a trigger warning for somebody in that situation. But that's not the majority of people, right? Like that's an unusual situation. Kind of like in the somatic, we talked about the somatic regulation. It's not everybody that's dealing with a precondition that strips or removes their ability to do basic maintenance, right?
Yes.
Like those people exist. And they usually, what's crazy is usually they're doing the best they can, right? Like they're usually troopers and getting to the other side of it. It's like the people who are totally able-bodied that are the ones that oftentimes like rust on their laurels and don't appreciate what they have. I mean, that's usually the case. And then they might even be, no longer be able-bodied because of the abuse they put their body through. So it's like usually it's like we don't know what we have until it's gone. But when it comes to emotional regulation, yes, those people, I totally understand trigger warnings for those people. The overwhelming majority of people, though, I think that they're using it as an excuse to continue outsourcing their regulation, right? Like they don't want to have to self-regulate, right? They don't want to have to confront a moment that makes them uncomfortable or deal with something to that effect. And yeah, I mean, it might sound really harsh. I guess this is like one of those moments when me being a thinker type like really comes to the forefront. Gen X thinker, but it's like, yeah, if you've got trauma in there, it's your job to get to the other side of it. Nobody, well, and the reason why is because nobody can do it for you. That's just what it comes down to. And a person cannot expect the world to be their unhealthy co-regulation codependent.
Well, we've been in, I mean, I'm sure somebody right now, I've been in these contexts where you're walking on eggshells around a person who's controlling the environment in a personal way. It may just be at a holiday party or something, right? And everybody's walking on eggshells because this person's going to like flip their lid if someone says the wrong thing or they don't get exactly what they want. They're like a tyrant. Or maybe they're not a tyrant. Maybe they're just like, they're going to collapse in on themselves.
Yeah,
and so everybody's trying
really fragile or something.
Fragile or tyrant or whatever. And we don't enjoy those experiences where we have to kind of walk on eggshells. And so that's a person that maybe can't regulate. And I understand trauma, but we have to self-assess. What does that trauma actually mean? What is all that? And obviously, we're not therapists. We're not talking about trauma. Like that's something maybe professionals can help with.
The context of the person that we were talking about before is like that's trauma with a capital T.
Yes.
And that requires like, I mean, it's kind of like trauma with a capital T with the body.
Yeah.
Like you go through a big enough car accident where it's crushed all of your bones. Like you're just, I mean, like that's just
physical therapy.
What are you supposed to do? I mean, it's like everything that bumps up against you for a long time is going to be painful, right? Like there's going to be a lot of pain involved there and everything is going, I mean,
yes.
you are in a physically fragile state now and it just is what it is. And if people can't sympathize with that, I don't know what to tell you. It's like that's a sympathetic situation, right? Like that's horrible. And a person, it will take them years, if not decades, to get to the other side, if ever. And they'll have to change their, like how they live. I mean, that happens. And so if that's the case, then it completely makes sense that a person in that situation would ask for a higher level of consideration.
Yes.
And if somebody is in an emotional version of that, because there are emotional versions of devastating, devastating car accidents, but for the heart, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean like a bad breakup, right? Like I'm talking about like, long-term sustained abuse during a time period of,
yes.
usually during a time period of like
wiring.
Yeah, wiring. Development. Then yeah, I mean, a person in that situation, that's a very sympathetic situation. But at the same time, I mean, and the word "but," it's like ... But it's like, but there's a lot of people who will piggyback off of that, like as in like use the sympathy for the person in the truly, truly terrible situation. They'll use humans' response of empathy to not have to face things that could be faced, to not have to self-regulate, to continue to engage with a codependent relationship with like society itself. And it's, I personally, I refuse to enter a codependent relationship with anybody. And that includes somebody who, and it's like, you don't always know what their circumstances are. You don't always know what the situation is, but sometimes you can do a pretty good read.
I know we've taken a little time on this, but I think it's important because I think this is where the lines are. This is where people struggle with this is like, what is mine to go to maybe therapy in a professional way, all these things. The one thing I've seen though, I'll end this section with this and then we'll go into talking about whatever we got to talk about next. I guess we pretty much covered everything. We're ready to wrap up probably after I know you want to give some specific action steps.
There are things that are emotional outsourcing, like specifics.
So let me just say this one thing about emotional outsourcing.
Yeah.
I've noticed that when somebody might write they've listened to a podcast of ours and we said something that was like emotionally triggering. Almost always they say, I'm okay with it, but everybody else is going to have blah, blah, blah. Like not always, but like 90 to 95%. It's like, it didn't really trigger me, but you've got to realize, guys, you can't say that because of blah, 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 blah. And it's like weird. It's like, wait, you want everybody to be codependent in this? You want to be on the giving side of the codependency?
Right.
Like the providing of it part where you're running out and kind of preemptively being upset or triggered emotionally on other people's
in behalf of everyone else.
And then I go, or is that just a cover? You actually are, but you feel bad that you have to display your unregulation. And so you're pretending like you're doing it on other people's behalf.
Yes.
But really this is about you. You're lying and saying it's not. You're lying to yourself and saying it's not, maybe.
Or on the other side, there's a hero complex, right? And they want to be like,
possibly
white. It can sometimes be a white knight situation. But I think it's more commonly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. People don't want to own that they're dysregulated.
So you think it's in that situation, and it's everybody's different. Clearly, we're just drawing pattern trends.
Yeah.
But potentially I'm trying to outsource this because I want to face it about myself.
Yeah.
That's what you're positing. Like, do you think I don't want to regulate my own emotions. So I'm going to make it the outside world's problem, but I feel weird about doing that. So I'm going to put myself in the outside world almost in a meta way and then reflect back to say, I'm not triggered, but somebody might be.
Yeah.
So it's like this really complex workaround to like not have to actually deal with it.
Well, it's at least entering that codependent dynamic because nobody can regulate for you.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes in and goes like, you might put somebody in a dysregulated place. It's like, well, maybe they need to know that about themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe they need to do some self-regulation around it. Like, I mean,
a thunderstorm this afternoon could do the same thing.
That's right.
I'm sorry I did that.
And I mean, this comes down to parenting. This probably sounds very unsympathetic, but quite frankly, I think that one of the best gifts you can give yourself is to learn how to properly self-regulate emotionally. It's like of the gifts that you can give to your future self, getting to a place where other people cannot trigger you. They just can't do it because you've allowed all the triggers to happen. You sat with them, you felt them, you did emotional processing around them. You recognized that that somebody didn't do something to you. All they did was shine something that was already there. I'm not saying that other people aren't dicks. Like some people are jerks, but this person is a jerk and you don't even notice it. And this other person is a jerk and now they're like the worst person that ever lived. And that's totally subjective. Like that person just happened to call something already inside of you.
I'm the control in that.
I'm the control.
Two people are affecting me differently. I'm the control in that variable.
Yeah, exactly. So those people are doing you a service by pointing out all of the dysregulated parts inside of you, all the things that need attention. And so now you can get to work. Now you can start learning the fine art of emotional self-regulation, which you can't ask anybody to do for you anyway. All you can ask them to do is to step on eggshells around you, which is actually not an appropriate ask. Like, Who are you? Why do you get to ask other people to be careful around you all the time? Why do you get to ask people to walk on eggshells around you? Like, why are you elevated to this position? And it's like, well, I mean, maybe I'm just a little too egalitarian in all of this, but I'm like, I don't think anybody should be elevated. I think some people, like the person who has gone through car crash level trauma, that's not an elevation. That's a recognition of a very, of an unusual and sympathetic situation. But most people are not there. Most of us have more resilience than we give ourselves credit for. And it's just, we're raised in a time period that that jumps in front of the bullet of triggers.
Yeah.
Right. Again, safe spaces, I think, were originally positively intended, but I think that we have become quite coddled. And the challenge isn't like, oh, everybody should just like, step up, or I'm not saying this in a way where I'm like, I think it's like, I'm sympathetic to that too. Does that make sense? It's like when somebody is triggered by everything and can't self-regulate, I'm very sympathetic to that person. I just know that the power to self-regulate lives inside of them. So I'm like, I feel bad that the person is in that situation, that nobody ever taught them this, that at no point did anybody go, listen, the way out is through and we will figure it out together, or maybe you'll just figure it out on your own, but I will give you some resources and tools. And when you get to the other side, like it's all gonna, like the sun will come out and there will be rays coming down and angels will sing and like life will be a million times better for you. For some reason, nobody's telling them that. They're going like, here's a pill. Here's another codependent relationship. Here's like a,
escape valve.
Here's an escape valve. Here's like a way, here's a trigger warning. Right. And I think it's like a form of abuse, actually. It's actually, it's a form of neglect. That's actually what it is. It's in the same way that a neglectful parent does not teach a child how to be fit for life. This is like a societal codependent form of neglect that we have on each other. We are neglecting each other's need in this way.
And we have an emotional crisis because of it.
A lot
of people struggling.
Mm-hmm. And have very low resilience. So here's the signs of emotional outsourcing when we're doing it ourselves, because we need to know when we're doing it as well. The first one is emotional dumping. Right? When we're trying to get other people to do our emotional regulation for us. That's what we mean by outsourcing. So pouring out overwhelming emotions onto someone without boundaries, hoping they will soothe or carry the emotions for us. So like the videos you were talking about, like on social media, you see these videos. I remember seeing this video of this woman who was probably she had to have been at least in her early 20s. Where she was like melting down because some man had gotten too close to her in a line at a box store. And her meltdown was a very clear plea for everybody else to like carry her emotion for her. And this would be emotional dumping. She was like dumping on everybody around her. Now, there was, in the comments, it was like, well, you don't know what problems that she has. And I'm like, well, then if she has that level of problem, she should have a handler. Right? Like if she can't do basic things, then somebody needs to be with her. If she's one of the kinds of people that just can't do it for herself. But if she can get herself there, it's like she's clearly outsourcing her emotions to the outside world. Seeking emotional mirroring. Like I'm mad about this, so you need to be mad about it too. Right? And
I've done that one before.
And that's to validate and regulate our emotional state, right?
Well, it's almost like it like gives credence to it, right? It like gives me like more content, like, oh, like now it's real if somebody else is joining me with it.
Right. It would be outsourcing emotional regulation to other people. Yep. Demanding comfort or sympathy, right? Expecting others to always know when and how to make us feel better, even when we can't clearly ask for what we need. Right. And so an example of this would be like having a bad day at work and then lashing out at your partner because they didn't instinctively comfort you enough, even though you didn't tell them that you needed it. Right. So this would be an example of unhealthy co-regulation.
Yeah.
All right. So just really quickly, we won't go super deep into this. We might create a program around this later. I don't know, but I just want to touch a little bit on, what are ways that we can use the functions as like a map for how to regulate ourselves? So let's start with introverted feeling or authenticity. In a triage moment, meaning that, you're in a spike point, so you've been triggered. You're not just doing regular maintenance, but you're actually in a like highly dysregulated state. Name your true feeling or value in the moment and remind yourself that it's just an emotion and a mood and you're not broken, right? Like I'm scared, but I'm not broken, right? Like I'm feeling this, even though everything feels chaotic, I know that I still care about kindness, right? So it's like you're reminding yourself that there's an emotion happening, but it's not necessarily a character. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like things are overwhelming, but I'm still a person who thinks kindness is important. That's a character trait, right? I'm scared, but I'm not like, that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, right? I'm not broken because I'm scared. So so in a triage moment, name the feeling you're feeling, and then remind yourself that this is a feeling. It's not, it's not a
mood.
forever. Yeah, it's mood. Yeah. So what about maintenance? So maintenance is regular self check-ins with emotional processing. So a lot of times people choose things like journaling, creative expression, finding ways to maintain a strong connection to the self, and a connection to one's authentic emotions. So I tend to do a exercise called emotional process and release. I've named it a couple times, and it's a version of active imagination that allows me to find an emotional expression in my body and then address it where it's at, honor it, feel it, and then there's a couple of things that I do in order to find a way to release it. And so doing those kinds of exercises, finding a way to process your emotions and release them is really important. And this is maintenance, right? And that way you don't have those emotional stacks waiting for you. You don't have like 19 iterations of something that now the 20th one is going to send you into a triage moment.
We both do this with clients and in our coaching work and in our personal lives, that emotional process. But you've reported to me that you've been doing this with a lot with your clients and coaching, particularly thinking clients. And it's really been helpful for them to get in touch with the emotion, the expression, and then moving it through. Yeah. It's been a lot of success in that.
Thinking clients and FJ clients.
Fair enough.
People with extroverted feeling, they're not always doing maintenance with introverted feeling. Right.
That would make sense.
Yeah. And so it's usually pretty powerful for people who don't have introverted feeling high up.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a practice you can do on a regular basis, preemptively or responsively, to release emotion.
Yeah. And for healthy co-regulation, if you are in a relationship with another person, you can have the relationship give space to both people to do maintenance work by holding space for them, compassionate space for their feelings without trying to fix them. Yeah. So introverted feeling or authenticity means like hearing the person, seeing them, understanding why they, saying things like, I understand why you would feel that way. And showing sympathy and, like a sense of like, you get to have your emotional experience and honoring that. Mm-hmm.
So those are more introverted feeling or authenticity things we can do. What about the extroverted feeling or harmony?
Right. So extroverted feeling or harmony is emotional regulation, oftentimes in relationship to other people. So you would think that this would be a great place for healthy co-regulation. It certainly is, but it's also a danger zone for unhealthy co-regulation. Right?
Codependency.
Or codependency. Exactly. So you have to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of that. But in a triage moment, in a spike moment, meaning that maybe you feel triggered in relationship, right? Like you feel like the other person is offensive to you or they're not communicating love or care or connection. Then in a triage moment, then you reach for connection, even a small one. So texting a loved one, maybe even a heart emoji. And that could be like, this person, maybe your partner, you're feeling disconnected from them or hurt feelings. And maybe you send one to a parent, right? Or a sibling or a best friend. If you're feeling off about your friends, you might send one to your partner. So basically it's allowing yourself to get the connection that you're craving, right? Like you need that moment to remind yourself that like not all of my relationships are spiraling down.
I noticed that when I'm really furious with you, like I'm really angry or I'm just like, we're disconnected, the last thing I want to do is touch you. Like, cause I'm mad and I don't want to give you any positive anything. And I've really tried to train myself when I feel like that to reach out and hold your hand or to touch you on the shoulder, like something that can communicate within reason. I have to, like, if you're triggered, sometimes you're like, please don't touch me right now. I'm like, okay, I back off. But like, if I'm like, put my hand near you or whatever, and you seem to be receptive to it, just gently touching you, it's actually, so I remind myself of the connection. Like, this is the person I love. Why am I allowing that to create disconnection? Like my instinct is to go away and keep disconnecting. Yes. But I'm trying to bring myself to like, and the moment I do, immediately I can feel my heart soften, but that's why I didn't want to touch you. Because I knew that was going to happen. Right. I knew the moment I like connected with you, I'm going to feel more empathy and sympathy and connection. Yeah. And so I'm like, like I know that's going to happen, but I'm trying to force it.
Yes.
So something like that could also be.
Absolutely.
Obviously checking with your partner, get consent, make sure they're okay with you, especially if you're in a dynamic like that.
Yeah.
But I think if they're okay with it, then that's something that can reconnect you physically very quickly.
Yeah.
In those moments.
What you're doing is you're reminding yourself that you might feel isolated in that moment, but you're actually not alone.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're connected to people, you have people who love you, you love people. It's just like a reminder.
Yeah.
To regulate back to a place of connection.
What about hygiene though?
So in a maintenance practice, it's, keep the plate spinning of the ties in your life, right? Like of the relationships in your life, like do touch-in points, like send texts or send notes, call people that you love on a regular basis, share social rituals, share meals, just make sure that, that you are reminding yourself that you're part of a community, that you're part of people, right? Like there are people, like we can't feel completely isolated for long. We will all shrivel out on the vine. So maintenance is making sure that you are tuning to and communicating, not just that you're loved back, but that you love.
Yeah.
And then on a very minimal level, it can also be like smiling at people, just like through the grocery store. I can't tell you how rarely people smile anymore. Like everybody's looking at their phone. Everybody's got a grumpy set look on their face. I do lots of smiling. I don't get a lot of smiles back necessarily, but I do for my age and older. But young people have a tendency to just they're just like completely in their own world, or they don't want to look at people, or I don't know if this is a social phobia thing, or if people just don't think that other people deserve it. I have absolutely no idea. I just know that smiling at strangers will remind you of actually how generous strangers usually are. Right? Like people are actually usually fundamentally good people. Not everybody, but most people, the overwhelming majority. And smiling reminds you you're part of the, sort of the human matrix.
Yeah.
So that's maintenance. And then co-regulation, healthy co-regulation is offering emotional attunement and warmth to the people in your life that you are the most intimate with. So like a partner or a good friend or family members, making sure that you're doing lots of eye contact, reaching out with words of encouragement, warm hugs, just keep that rapport going.
I want to ask you about last minute thoughts here, kind of to wrap this up, but it just brings up the fact that, here at Personality Hacker, we talk a lot about personality types, and you can almost look at it like a type, like a label, like ENFP preferences for me, or whatever preferences are for you listening. And labels can be great because they can help us understand more about ourselves. But I think the other thing that personality types can give us is topography, not just typology. And that's more of the map, like we've been talking about, to find the parts of ourselves that maybe need more regulation. And in here, we're talking about the emotions of it. Maybe that's what you struggle with if you're listening. Maybe you have a different aspect of yourself that you actually think is more unregulated and you need help with. I think a lot of people find themselves in emotions needing regulation. Mm-hmm. But I would recommend, if this is something you want to go deeper into, we have actually a program where we do an audit of all these 8 areas of your life, including the emotional systems, the introverted and extroverted. We call it the personality life path. And through 8 weeks, we go through and do this audit, and we attune to each one of these in your life, because your personality will dictate which aspects of these you prioritize, you're comfortable with, you're certain of, and which ones you're not certain of. In fact, some of them are in your shadow, right? They're pulling the strings from the darkness. They're influencing us without us even knowing it. And if that's an emotional part of you, that can be really difficult because maybe it's unregulated and you're not even aware of it because it's in your shadow functions. That's really tough. And so I've noticed that people, when they go through the personality life path, they often identify this even in the shadow. We're able to work it's a very limited program, very small groups we work with, but they're able to work with the emotions directly and actually work on this regulation. Mm-hmm. Some people that have that as the issue. And so seeing personality type as a map and locating where this is for you, I think is really important. If you would like to go deeper into that kind of shadow work and that audit, head over to personalityhacker.com and look for the Personality Life Path mentorship. And if we're doing open enrollment right now, you should consider joining this program and being part of it with us. I think you'd really benefit from that. It ends in a live 3-day event, in person or online streaming, which we give you a systems map of your life and the next steps to take on what you need to do on your life path. And it's designed to really tune into your real life, meet you where you're at, and get you aligned to what you want what the outcome you want, whether it's optimization of self or some goal you want to go for, or just knowing what your transition is into the next. A lot of people in transition come to that program because they're wanting to get a handle on the regulation or wanting to get a sense of direction or whatever it might be. So I really recommend that. And while you're over at personalityhacker.com, directly below this episode, leave a comment, ask a question, or more importantly, share your story about regulation. What's coming up for you? How is this? How's this showing up? So come over and make your voice heard. So let's wrap this up. What can be the takeaway today for people that are listening right now? Let's put a bow on this, Antonia.
Yeah, I would say that of all four of the ways that we regulate or need to self-regulate, emotions are maybe one of the trickiest subjects because it feels like we have dysregulated emotions based on how people have treated us. So it feels unfair, like we have to do the work. Once somebody treats us in a certain way we experience something that's akin to, I would say, lowercase trauma. But when we experience things that are uncomfortable feelings or like we experienced dysregulation at the time that somebody treated us poorly or we didn't get what we needed or, like all the millions upon millions of things that can go wrong in a life and cause unpleasant emotions to have to process. I think it feels very unfair that people can treat us in these ways and then now I have to do emotional labor. I have to do emotional work. I have to do inner game work. And I think on some level, I think it is unfair, right? I think, in a perfectly just world, people would treat us kindly and our caretakers would give us everything that we needed in order to become the best versions of ourselves. And it would be rainbows and, bunnies. But unfortunately, most of us don't get that experience. And actually, weirdly enough, the truth is that if a person does not have any pressure, any stress on them, oftentimes they don't form resilience because resilience is something that is forged over time through experiences. And so the challenge is that we're forged by fire by life itself, right? Like we are forged in the crucible of all of our experiences. And that includes the ones that caused what we might experience now as dysregulation. And I would say it is unfair that that's how it works. And yet it doesn't change the fact that only we can regulate ourselves. Like that's just the truth. And the truth isn't always fair. Like that's just reality. And so while there is plenty of reason to feel to experience the emotion of resentment or experience the emotion of a lack of fairness, whatever that comes with disappointment, frustration, anger, grief. It's all understandable. And it's all ours to process.
Yeah.
Right. We're the only ones who can do it. And again, one of the greatest gifts a person can give themselves is to stop looking to the outside world to do their regulation for them and to start regulating themselves. It might be the greatest gift you can give to yourself. And I would say in both the sensing, somatic, physiological channel and the emotional channel. These are two, the reason why we're going through them in the order that we're going through them in is because I think that anytime I'm dysregulated, the first thing I check is my soma. I go, is there anything dysregulated in my body, in my soma? And the second thing I go is there anything emotionally dysregulated here? Because they're the foundation of everything. Everything hits them first. They're the most ancient parts of who and what we are, right? They're like they're in the ancient triune brain, right? There are
lizard
and mammalian brains, right? And so so if you are a person who has a tendency to maybe even get triggered by an episode like this, right? And especially me being like, I don't think trigger warnings are doing most people any favors. And I'm sorry that people go through trauma, but you got to get to the other side of it. If even that is triggering to you, I cannot impress or overstate the value of sitting with it. like being there, going, why don't I like that? And why does that make me feel so bad? And what's happening for me? And as opposed to going like, and Antonia Dodge, you're the person that's the person in the wrong. I very well might be, yet still nothing. The only way that I could have quote unquote regulated you through all of that is to say nothing. Don't shoot the messenger. Right. Yeah, exactly. Basically what you're saying. Yeah, I'm like, it's, and there's lots of messengers, tons and tons and tons, and every trigger is a gift. Yeah. Every single one of them. So anyway, so that's my little spiel at the end. That's my little, like, not particularly like the goth version of a cheerleader, right? It's like, sorry, but we got to do it. And if you do it, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable on the other side. The goth version of a cheerleader. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry. but right now your job is to come over here to personalityhacker.com directly with this episode, leave a comment, ask a question, or share a story about this and what's actually coming up for you. I think this would be interesting to get a conversation going. So come over and make your voice heard. Yeah. And I should probably add, and me too. Yes. Right. Because we talk about being in fights and we talk about like all sorts of times when I'm, emotional dysregulation. This whole thing started because I went, oh my gosh, I'm not self-regulating. So I 100% include myself in this entire human dance of needing to deal with one's own shit. All right. All of that said, if you happen to enjoy the podcast and aren't you triggered by me, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and a variety of Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that would be awesome. I read every single one of them. We're also on like Spotify and other places too, not just Apple, but that's where the rating and reviews come through. They do. But Spotify is where most people, I think, listen to us at this point. A rating and review on Spotify would be awesome as well. I don't know if they have it. That's what I'm saying. I think that's why we ask for the Apple Podcast, is that's where you can leave a rating and review. I have no idea. I don't listen to Spotify that much. There are other places, but I don't. They're not as prevalent, so I don't know. So I didn't mean to derail you. Keep going. Okay. It was fantastic. Your wrap up was fantastic. I loved it. And also, we have a video podcast. We have a video podcast on YouTube. You could be watching it right now. If you're doing that, you can subscribe, and hit the bell for future episodes. And then you can also leave a comment underneath the video. Yeah. Check out our Personality Life Path mentorship. I'm telling you. It's life-changing. Mm-hmm. My name is Joel Mark Witt. And I'm Antonia Dodge. And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.